I didn't walk into that boardroom expecting applause. I'm not that naive. But I also didn't expect them to laugh. Not at me. Not after everything I'd held together for them. People think humiliation is loud, explosive, raised voices, slammed doors, red faces. Mine was quiet. It fit inside the space of a single breath, a breath I didn't take. The email said mandatory presence. No explanation, no agenda. Just a timestamp and a floor number I'd never been invited to before. 22nd floor. The one with the glass walls where the air smells like money and the chairs probably cost more than my monthly rent. I walked in wearing the only suit I own, the one I bought 5 years ago for my sister's wedding. It still fit, but only because I don't change much. My job doesn't let me. I'm the guy they call when everything is already on fire. When the launch is 6 hours away and someone finally realizes there's no back-end monitoring. When a client threatens to pull a contract because the star performer overpromised something we can't deliver. When a junior panics at 11:47 p.m. because the code won't deploy and nobody else answers their phone. That guy. The quiet one. The fixer. The one who keeps the cracks invisible so other people can take the credit for walking across the floor. So when I took a seat near the back of the boardroom that morning, I didn't assume the meeting was about me. I just assumed they needed me to run slides or answer the technical questions no one else wanted to handle. That's usually why I get dragged into these things. Derek sat near the front, smiling like the CEO had personally told him a secret. Derek always smiled like that. Perfect haircut, perfect watch, perfect fake humility. He looked at me from across the room and gave me that friendly, useless thumbs up he does, the one that means nothing and everything at the same time. His suit was new. His confidence was too. The directors filed in. CFO, COO, 2 VPs, the CEO himself. Talking about record growth, preparing statements, improving optics. I know those words. They usually mean somebody is about to take credit for something they didn't build. The meeting started with a slideshow I had assembled at 2 a.m. the night before. They didn't mention that part. They never do. They just clicked through charts, nodded, congratulated each other, and talked about strong leadership, while my stomach tightened in that small, familiar way it does when I realize the truth in real time. They were celebrating a year I had carried on my back without ever being invited to the celebration. Then the CEO cleared his throat and smiled the way people smile when they're about to perform something rehearsed. "We want to recognize exemplary effort," he said. "People who embody the spirit of innovation." Someone dimmed the lights a little. Someone else adjusted the camera. They were filming this. My chest tightened. "And first," the CEO continued, "we want to honor someone who went above and beyond to drive revenue this quarter." Derek stood up before his name was even said. He knew. Of course he knew. They handed him a white envelope, thick, glossy, probably printed overnight. $25,000, the CFO announced. Applause, photos, a joke about Derek taking us all to Cancun. More laughter. I clapped. I even smiled. What else was I supposed to do? Then the CEO said, "And we also want to recognize another employee." For half a second, I felt something in my chest shift. Not hope, not expectation, just the possibility of being seen. There he is. Come on up." They didn't say my last name. They didn't need to. Everyone turned their heads toward me in that polite, detached way people do when a janitor walks into a gala to refill the water pitchers. I walked to the front. My steps sounded too loud in the quiet. The COO reached into his pocket, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and held it between two fingers, like he was handing me a parking voucher. "For coffee," he said. "The team runs on your caffeine runs, right?" Laughter, actual laughter. I felt heat rise in my chest, not anger, something much colder. I took the bill, I nodded, I forced a smile. I heard myself say, "Thank you," even though my throat was closing. A VP slapped my back on the way to my seat. "Don't spend it all in one place," he joked. And that was it. That was the whole moment. Derek's bonus would be added to his performance review. Mine wouldn't even reach payroll. It wasn't a reward. It wasn't recognition. It was a joke, one they expected me to participate in. I sat down. The meeting continued. Growth projections, Q3 targets, upcoming partnerships. My name never came up again. Not once. But something else did. A thought I've never had before. Not in 15 years at this job. You don't have to stay here. When the meeting ended, people filed past me like I wasn't even part of the room anymore. Derek gave me another thumbs up, as if that made us equals. Someone said, "Cheer up, man. Free money?" I walked out of the building with the $100 still in my hand. I didn't put it in my wallet. I didn't fold it. I just held it, like evidence. Because that's what it was. Not of what they thought of me. I already knew that. But of what I had allowed myself to accept for far too long. And I think that's the moment the story really begins. The morning after the board meeting felt strangely normal, which somehow made everything worse. The office lights hummed, printers clicked, keyboards rattled. My badge didn't suddenly stop working. No one pulled me aside to apologize or even acknowledge what happened. People carried on like nothing had shifted at all, except inside me, something already had. When I walked past the kitchen, 2 analysts were laughing about something. I didn't think they meant me until one of them said, "Man, imagine getting $100 from the board. I'd frame it." They didn't see me. Or maybe they did and pretended not to. I'm not sure which option was worse. My phone buzzed with Slack notifications, most of them harmless, but all of them landing the same way. "Morning, Coffee King? CEO likes you. Free caffeine for us now. Derek's bonus is insane, dude. Did you know he closed the Atlas deal by himself?" That last one made me stop mid-step. By himself. I was the one who wrote the proposal. The one who salvaged the demo when the server fell apart 10 minutes before the call. The one who stayed after midnight rewriting Derek's pitch script, because his version made no sense. I clicked the Slack thread open, read the comments, and closed it again without typing anything. I wasn't angry. Anger would have felt cleaner. This was something else, like pressure building inside a sealed jar, quiet and constant. At my desk, I opened my email. Overnight, 3 clients had written asking for updates on projects I'd been shepherding for months. Derek was copied on all of them. He replied with one-line messages full of confident nonsense that would fall apart in any real conversation. All I could see was the fallout waiting behind every sentence. I started writing corrections and then stopped, not out of spite, out of clarity. If he was the star, he could handle his own stage. Around noon, my manager Todd walked by with his usual half-smile, the one he uses when he's pretending he's checking in but really checking boxes. "You good after yesterday?" he asked, leaning against my cubicle wall like we were old friends. "I'm fine," I said. "You know how these board events go. Optics, recognition cycles, bonus caps. Don't take it personally." He said it kindly, and that somehow made it worse. I looked at him for a long moment, really seeing him. A man so used to minimizing people's experiences, he didn't even realize he was doing it anymore. "Why was Derek eligible for a bonus and I wasn't?" I asked. He blinked, like he hadn't expected the question. "Different roles, different visibility?" "My project generated more revenue." Todd's smile thinned. "It's complicated." It wasn't. Not really. After he walked away, I opened the folder I kept buried under layers of subfolders inside my drive. A quiet archive of things I never intended to use. Timelines, email chains, Jira logs, timestamps, client commendations, the original Atlas proposal with my name in the metadata. Evidence of a year spent patching holes while others paraded through them. I wasn't building a case. I was just seeing, maybe for the first time, the shape of what I'd been carrying. Around 3, I refilled my water bottle in the break room. That's when I noticed someone standing by the counter. Ray from operations. He was at the board meeting the day before, sitting in the back. He didn't clap during the coffee money moment. He didn't even smile. "You okay?" he asked. low enough that no one else could hear. "Yeah," I said. He gave me a look that said he didn't buy it. Ray's the kind of guy who knows numbers better than people but still notices everything. "I've seen a lot of dumb decisions here," he said quietly. "Yesterday wasn't dumb. It was disrespectful. That's different." I didn't respond. He continued anyway. "You ever think about moving on? Companies would line up for someone who can do what you did with Atlas." "Not really," I said. "You should." He didn't linger. He didn't push. He just said it like a fact he'd verified twice. When I went back to my desk, Derek was there, leaning against it, smiling wide. "Dude, crazy day yesterday, right? We should go out this weekend. Celebrate the big win." The big win, his win, my work. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel resentment. I felt distance, an understanding that whatever world he lived in, I wasn't part of it. "Busy weekend," I said. He shrugged and walked off, humming. The afternoon dragged. Emails piled, tasks pinged, deadlines approached. Oh, normally I'd absorb the weight automatically. Someone had to. But something in me refused to step forward. Instead, I let the messages sit until people followed up, not maliciously, just fairly. By 5, the pressure inside me wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity, steady and cold. I opened my inbox, scrolled through old unread messages, and found one from a recruiter dated 2 months earlier. A short, polite invitation to chat about a role at a competitor known for treating technical leads like actual human beings. I'd ignored it at the time. I didn't ignore it now. I typed 4 words. "Is the role open?" I hit send. Then I sat back. The office around me buzzed like nothing had changed. But something had. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. The room felt different. My desk felt different. I felt different. And I didn't know it yet, but the smallest decision of my entire career was already moving the ground beneath their feet. The recruiter replied before I even reached my train. "Still open. Your timing is perfect. Can you talk tomorrow morning?" I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I'd expected a polite rejection or a delayed response, something that would give me time to second-guess myself. Instead, the door swung open so fast it felt like I'd been pushed toward it. I typed back a simple "yes," stepped into the cold evening air, and for the first time in months, didn't think about work on the way home. The interview wasn't some dramatic cinematic scene. It was calm, steady, almost boring, which somehow made it hit harder. The hiring manager, a technical director named Melissa, had already reviewed my portfolio. She didn't care about performance awards or buzzwords. She cared about the work, and the work spoke for itself. "I've seen your Atlas proposal," she said. "Your structure is clean. Your risk mitigation strategy is more mature than what we've seen from people 5 years senior to you." I waited for the catch. She continued, "We've been looking for someone exactly like you. Someone who can take a messy product and make it reliable." Messy product. Reliable. I'd spent years doing that in silence. We talked for an hour, then another. The discussion shifted from technical skills to operational workflows, to leadership philosophy, to things no executive at my current job had ever asked me. By the time the call ended, she said, "If you're open to it, we'd like to move fast. 2 more conversations. That's it. If those go well, we'll move to an offer." It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like someone was finally speaking my language. Back at the office, chaos had quietly begun to bloom. Derek was drowning, though he didn't know it yet. The clients he'd been so eager to impress were asking for deliverables he didn't understand, pressing for timelines he couldn't reason through, questioning the decisions he'd made in their last meeting. He forwarded half of those emails to me, writing, "Need your insight." The other half he responded to with confident promises I knew were impossible. I answered only the questions assigned me, nothing more. When he stopped by my desk to run something by me really quick, I told him I was heads down and to email me. The look on his face wasn't angry. It was confused, like a man who'd leaned on a railing his whole life and suddenly found empty air. Meanwhile, Todd sent me a meeting invite with the title Follow-up from Board Discussion. No agenda, no notes, just a time. I didn't decline it. I didn't accept it either. I let it sit in my inbox untouched. 2 days later, I had the final interview with Melissa's team. A systems architect walked me through a case study. A senior engineer asked about documentation I'd written years ago. A product lead wanted to understand how I handled conflict. All reasonable questions, all grounded in reality. By the end of the call, I could tell, not from their words but from the relaxed tone, that they'd already made their decision. When the offer arrived that evening, it was clean and professional. Higher base salary, performance-based quarterly bonuses, actual boundaries, actual support. They didn't promise the moon, they promised structure. There was nothing dramatic about it, which made it feel even more solid. I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even reply right away. I just let the reality settle into place like a weight removed rather than added. The next day at work, things finally snapped. A major client, the one Atlas was built for, scheduled a meeting to review progress. It was supposed to be Derek's moment. He insisted on leading it, but because he'd leaned on me for months, he'd never truly learned the system. And because executives believed their own narrative, no one questioned letting him run the call. I sat quietly at the end of the table, invited only to support technical questions. Derek opened with confidence. Too much confidence. He started talking about a feature that didn't exist yet, a timeline we couldn't meet, a financial projection that required 3 contractors we hadn't even hired. I watched the client's face shift from polite interest to slow, controlled irritation. Halfway through, Derek stumbled. He clicked the wrong slide. He contradicted his earlier statement. He gave a number that wasn't just inaccurate. It was mathematically impossible. Then he looked at me, not for help, for rescue. The same silent plea he'd relied on for years. And I didn't move. Not out of cruelty, out of truth. He'd insisted he could lead. Now he was leading. The client turned to me finally and asked, "Can you clarify?" Before I could speak, Todd jumped in with a rehearsed-sounding line. "We're all aligned here. Derek has full command of the project." The client raised an eyebrow. "Does he?" Silence. Heavy, long, undeniable. After the meeting, Derek cornered me in a hallway. "Why didn't you jump in?" I wasn't asked. "You always help." "I help the work, not the narrative." He stared at me like he was seeing someone new. Maybe he was. That afternoon, I submitted my resignation. 2 weeks' notice. Professional handoff plan. Full documentation. Every step clean and ethical. The opposite of what they'd expected from someone who'd been dismissed with a $100 bill. When Todd saw the email, he came to my desk instantly. "This is a joke, right?" "No. You can't leave. Not now. Not with Atlas mid-cycle." "I can," I said, "and I am." He tried strategy after strategy. Guilt, flattery, minimization, promises of future recognition, vague talk about long-term growth, but each sentence only made my decision firmer. "You're overreacting," he said finally. "That bored moment wasn't personal." "It was," I said. "You just didn't think I'd notice." The executive team held an emergency meeting about my departure. I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be, because by then the real shift had already begun. On my second to last day, the Atlas client requested something unusual. A brief private call, off-cycle, unscheduled, quiet. They didn't ask me about timelines or deliverables. They asked about me. "Where are you going next?" I answered honestly. "Would you be open to staying in touch once your non-compete terms are clear?" I answered honestly again. They didn't mention Derek. They didn't need to. The last thing the client said was, "We trusted the work because we trusted you." That doesn't go away. When the call ended, I sat still for a long moment, letting the weight of that settle. Because what was coming next wasn't chaos for me, it was clarity, and the chaos belonged to them. My last morning at the company felt strangely quiet, like the building itself hadn't decided how to feel about me leaving. People nodded at me in hallways the way they nod at someone who's already half gone. Polite, detached, careful not to get involved. I packed slowly, not because I was sentimental, but because I wanted to be deliberate. Every cable rolled neatly, every notebook stacked, every file backed up on the company drive exactly where it belonged. No one would be able to say I'd left a mess behind. Todd stopped by once, hovering in that uncertain way managers do when their authority has slipped, but they haven't figured out why. "If you change your mind," he said, "we can revisit title adjustments next quarter, maybe even compensation adjustments later in the year." He said it gently, but the timing made it hollow. Even he heard it. "I'm good," I said. He nodded, eyes dropping to the floor for a split second. A tiny concession that he understood this wasn't negotiable anymore. Then he walked away, and I didn't have to pretend to appreciate the offer. My goodbye wasn't dramatic. I didn't make a speech. I didn't post on LinkedIn about new chapters. I sent a short farewell email thanking people for the work, not the company. People replied with the kind of messages that mean, well, but don't change anything. But one email wasn't generic. Ray wrote, "You made this place look more competent than it was. Don't carry that skill into your new job unless they earn it." I smiled for the first time that day. Leaving felt less like stepping out the door and more like removing a weight that no one else realized had been there. The new company didn't celebrate my arrival with banners or welcome baskets. They sent me login credentials, a meeting schedule, and a clean workspace. That alone felt like a promotion. My boss, Melissa, met me with a brief handshake and a sentence that set the tone for everything that followed. "We brought you here to build something stable. Start wherever the cracks are. No performance theatrics, no showmanship, just work, the kind I knew how to do." The first few weeks were dense but manageable. Systems that hadn't been touched in years. Processes half written and half forgotten. People who were hungry for someone who didn't panic when confronted with a problem that had been ignored too long. And slowly, the pieces slipped into place. Meetings that once left me drained now energized me. I said no when timelines didn't make sense and was met with acceptance instead of irritation. I fixed things, but this time no one took the wrench out of my hand and posed with it afterward. 3 months into the job, I received a message on my personal email. It was the Atlas client, not a complaint, not a crisis, just a single sentence. "We'd like to schedule a conversation regarding future work." They weren't reaching out illegally. They weren't asking for confidential information. They were simply making a choice, the same way I had. We talked, carefully, professionally. They told me what had been happening since I left, missed deadlines, contradictory updates, meetings full of filler and no substance. They didn't name Derek, but I didn't need them to. The damage was recognizable. I didn't pitch anything. I didn't persuade. I listened. I explained what my new company did and what we didn't do. I didn't push them toward any decision. 2 weeks later, they signed with us. The news didn't hit my old company like an explosion. It hit like erosion. Slow at first, then impossible to ignore. Ray called me after hours from his personal phone. "The board wanted a scapegoat," he said quietly. "It wasn't you. They didn't have you anymore. So, you can guess." I didn't feel joy hearing it. More like a quiet acknowledgement of a truth that had been waiting in the wings. Derek was reassigned, stripped of lead roles, put under a manager who didn't tolerate improvisation or excuses. His star performer status evaporated. Not overnight, but steadily, the same way it had been built, through perception. Executives who'd been so eager to pose next to him were suddenly nowhere in sight. The same people who had laughed when they handed me $100 now sat through meetings explaining why the quarter's projections had slipped, why client confidence had unexpectedly shifted, why retention metrics were declining. They didn't use my name, but the absence of my name was the reason they were speaking. Melissa forwarded me an internal message from her executive director later that month. "Great hire," it said. No exclamation point, no PR glitter, just clarity. There was a moment, one quiet evening, when I realized I hadn't thought about my old office in days. Not because I was trying to move on, but because I already had. The satisfaction didn't come from watching them fall. It came from the truth that had finally settled into my bones. I had never needed their recognition. They had needed my work, and once I stopped giving it to them for free, everything shifted exactly as it should have. My new team trusted me, asked for my input, took responsibility for their own work instead of silently handing me their emergencies. The systems I built started running smoothly enough that I didn't need to babysit them. On a quiet Friday afternoon, Melissa stopped by my desk. "You're up for the quarterly bonus," she said, not because of any optics, because the product line is healthier than it's been in years. I nodded and she added, "Don't undersell what you did here." I didn't. That evening I walked home with the sunset behind me, hands in my pockets, nothing pulling at my chest. When I reached my apartment, I found something taped to my fridge that I'd forgotten about. The same $100 bill from the board meeting flattened under a magnet. I'd kept it not out of pride or bitterness, but as a reminder, not of what they gave me, but of what I stopped accepting. I didn't frame it, I didn't throw it away. I just left it there, quiet and harmless, the way the past becomes once it loses its power. That was all the closure I needed.